my world until the moment it shattered, was a beautifully curated exhibit in a museum of old money and older traditions. My name is Alara Vance, and the Vance name was both my inheritance and my cage. The air in our family manor always smelled of lemon polish and ambition, a scent I'd learned to navigate like a second language. Tonight the air was different, charged with the effervescent promise of my engagement to Julian Blackwood. Julian was the heir to the Blackwood fortune, a match my parents had gently then firmly steered me toward since we were teenagers. He was handsome in a polished, predictable way, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I had convinced myself that fondness and respect were a stronger foundation for a marriage than fleeting passion. Now, standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grand Elysian ballroom, watching the city lights twinkle like a bed of fallen stars, I tried to summon the joy I was supposed to feel. The emerald necklace at my throat felt heavy, a familiar weight. It was the sterling heirloom, a breathtaking piece of Art Deco jewelry that had been passed down through the Vance family for 4 generations. It was never meant to be a mere accessory. It was a symbol of legacy, of the unbroken line of strength and resilience that defined the women in my family. My mother had placed it around my neck just an hour ago, her eyes glistening with a pride I desperately wanted to be worthy of. "Nervous, little sister?" The voice, laced with a condescension I'd learned to tolerate, came from my left. My brother. Adopted as a young child after his parents, close friends of my father, died in a tragic accident, he had always been treated as a true-born Vance. But somewhere along the way a chasm had opened between us, and it had a name: Chloe. Chloe was my cousin, my mother's sister's daughter. Orphaned and taken in by our family with the same open arms they'd offered Liam. Where I was all sharp edges and quiet observation, Chloe was softness and sunbeams. She had a way of melting into a room, of drawing protectiveness from everyone around her with a single well-timed tear. And Liam was her most devoted knight. "Not nervous, Liam," I replied, my voice steady despite the flutter in my stomach. "Just contemplative. Don't overthink it, Alara. This is your night. Just try not to overshadow Chloe. You know how sensitive she is about these things." The comment was a tiny, precise prick of a needle. There it was again. My success was a potential slight against Chloe's fragility. I turned to look at him. He was handsome, sharing our father's strong jawline, but his eyes so often held a judgment I couldn't comprehend. "I have no intention of overshadowing anyone. This is an engagement party, not a competition." He gave a non-committal hum, his gaze already scanning the crowd for her. I followed his line of sight and found Chloe. She was a vision in pale pink silk, her eyes wide and dewy as she chatted with a group of guests. Her gaze flickered to me, to the necklace at my throat, and for a fraction of a second, a raw, hungry look crossed her features before it was smoothed away by her practiced, gentle smile. I remembered the scene from this afternoon. She had drifted into my dressing room, a wistful sigh on her lips. "Oh, Alara," she'd breathed, her fingers hovering just inches from the emerald. "It's even more stunning on you. I've always thought it was the most beautiful piece in the world. It's just so sad that it only comes out for these formal occasions. It deserves to be seen." "It's not a trinket, Chloe. It has a history," I'd said, perhaps too sharply. Her lower lip had trembled. "I know that. I wasn't suggesting it was. I feel a connection to it, I suppose. It feels like family." And now, under the brilliant chandeliers of the Elysian, that conversation felt like a prelude. The orchestra swelled, signaling the beginning of the formal proceedings. My father, a pillar of quiet strength, took my hand and squeezed it. "Ready, my dear?" I nodded, my throat tight. We moved to the center of the ballroom, a path clearing for us. Julian stood waiting at the makeshift dais, his posture perfect, his smile in place. The crowd was a sea of smiling, expectant faces. This was it. The moment my future was to be officially, publicly sealed. My father gave a short, warm speech about new beginnings and the joining of 2 great families. He placed my hand in Julian's. Julian's grip was firm, almost possessive. "Friends, family," Julian began, his voice projecting easily across the room. "Thank you for being here to celebrate this joyous occasion with Alara and me." I let his words wash over me, trying to anchor myself in the moment. This was my life. This was the path. I could be happy here. I would make myself happy here. But then his tone shifted. The practiced warmth bled away, replaced by something colder, sharper. "However," he said, and the single word dropped into the room like a stone. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. "However, before we can truly celebrate a union, it's important that both parties enter into it with character and integrity." My blood ran cold. I tried to catch his eye, but he was looking out at the audience, a performance of grave disappointment on his face. A marriage cannot be built on a foundation of pettiness and spite. It cannot thrive when one party seeks to diminish others out of jealousy. My gaze snapped to Liam. He was standing rigid, his eyes narrowed at me. Beside him, Chloe had a handkerchief to her eyes, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. A pit of dread opened in my stomach. "It has come to my attention," Julian continued, his voice dripping with faux regret, "that Alara, in a display of shocking possessiveness, deliberately flaunted the family heirloom tonight for the sole purpose of upsetting her cousin Chloe. A cousin who has been nothing but kind and supportive." The air was sucked from the room. 1,000 eyes burned into me. Whispers turned into a dull roar in my ears. Chloe, who is like a sister to her, expressed her admiration for the piece, and instead of sharing in that appreciation, Alara chose to use it as a weapon to cause pain. I was frozen. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. "I cannot," Julian declared, his voice rising in a crescendo of self-righteousness, "in good conscience bind myself to a woman capable of such calculated cruelty. A woman who would bully her own flesh and blood. Therefore, until Alara can learn this fundamental lesson in kindness and humility, our engagement is off." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical weight crushing me. Humiliation, hot and sharp, scalded my cheeks. I saw the triumph in Chloe's tear-filled eyes, the grim approval on Liam's face. I saw the shock and dawning horror on my parents' faces. And in that moment, as I stood utterly alone in the center of the ballroom, the gilded cage of my life didn't just open. It exploded, and I was left standing in the wreckage, naked and exposed to the world. The walk from the center of the ballroom to the edge of the crowd was the longest of my life. Each step was a monumental effort, as if I were wading through setting concrete. The silence had broken, replaced by a cacophony of whispers that lashed at me like tiny whips. I felt the stares, pitying, curious, scornful, but I kept my chin high, my eyes fixed on a point in the distance, a small dark painting on the far wall. It was my anchor. If I looked at anyone, if I saw the confirmation of my utter ruin in their eyes, I would shatter. I heard my mother's sharp, indrawn breath, my father's low, rumbling, "What is the meaning of this, Julian?" But their voices seemed to come from the end of a long tunnel. My feet carried me not toward the exit but toward the source of the poison. I stopped before Liam and Chloe. Chloe was now fully weeping into Liam's shoulder, her body a perfect portrait of distressed innocence. Liam's arm was wrapped protectively around her, his face a mask of cold fury directed solely at me. "How could you, Alara?" he hissed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Was your moment in the spotlight so important that you had to destroy hers? Look at her. Look what you've done." The absurdity of it, the sheer, breathtaking injustice, was a spark on the kindling of my humiliation. The numbness began to recede, burned away by a rising, cleansing fire. I looked at Chloe, really looked at her. I saw the subtle calculation behind the tears, the slight, smug curve of her mouth she couldn't quite hide as she pressed her face into Liam's jacket. This wasn't about a necklace. It was never about a necklace. It was a masterfully executed coup. She had taken the one thing I had that she truly coveted, my position, my security, my legacy, and with a few well-placed tears and whispered lies, she had convinced the two most important men in my life to hand it to her on a silver platter. I felt a strange calm descend upon me. The fire in my veins wasn't rage, it was clarity. "You believe him?" I asked Liam, my voice unervingly quiet and steady. "You believe I would do that? To her? To myself?" "I believe what I see," he retorted, his grip tightening on Chloe. "And I've seen the way you've treated her for years. A cold shoulder here, a sharp word there. You've always been jealous of the light she brings into a room. Jealous." The word was so ludicrous it almost made me laugh. I was the heiress to the Vance fortune. I had been given every material advantage, every opportunity. But what I hadn't been given, what Chloe seemed to harvest so effortlessly, was the unconditional, unquestioning belief of my own brother. The weight of the sterling heirloom against my collarbone felt different now. It was no longer a symbol of my lineage. It was a shackle to this narrative of petty jealousy. It was the prop in their little play. My hands rose to the clasp at the back of my neck. My fingers, which should have been trembling, were perfectly steady. The intricate mechanism gave way with a soft, final click. The silence in the room deepened. Everyone was watching, breath held. I held the necklace in my palm. The emerald caught the light, winking, a droplet of captured forest fire. It was beautiful. It was mine. And it was worthless to me in this context. I didn't look at Julian. He was already a ghost. I looked directly at Liam. "You're so concerned with her comfort, with her desires," I said, my voice carrying in the hushed room. I extended my hand, offering the necklace to Chloe. "Here, since you admire it so much. Since it causes you so much pain to see me wear it. Take it." Chloe's weeping stalled. Her eyes, wide and startled, flickered from the necklace to my face. She didn't move. Liam stared at me aghast. "Alara, don't be absurd. That's a Vance heirloom. You can't just give it away." "Why not?" I asked, my tone lethally calm. "If it's the source of all this bitterness and bullying, then it's a poison, not an heirloom. I'm removing the poison. Take it, Chloe. It's what you wanted, isn't it?" This was my checkmate. I knew with absolute certainty that Liam would never let her accept it. To give away the sterling heirloom on a whim to a cousin, no matter how beloved, would be a profound disrespect to the family he so desperately wanted to be a full part of. He understood the weight of tradition, even if he failed to understand the people within it. Chloe made a hesitant move to reach for it, but Liam's hand shot out and closed over her wrist, stopping her. "Put it back on, Alara," he commanded, his voice tight. "This is not the time for more of your dramatics." The fire in me flared, bright and hot. "Dramatics? You stand by and watch as my fiancé, my former fiancé, publicly eviscerates me on the basis of a lie, and you accuse me of dramatics." I turned my gaze to Chloe. "He won't let you take it, you see. Because for all his grandstanding about your hurt feelings, he knows this isn't a trinket. It's a legacy, one he has no right to give away. And you never really wanted the necklace, did you? You just wanted me not to have it. You wanted to prove you could take it from me." The mask slipped completely then. For a single unguarded moment, pure, undiluted hatred shone in her eyes. It was there and gone so fast I might have imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. The crowd saw it too. A fresh wave of murmurs spread through the room. The narrative was cracking. I let the necklace dangle from my fingers, a glittering, accusatory pendulum between us. It seems the lesson Julian wanted to teach me has been learned. But not by me. I turned my back on them, on the entire gaping audience. The necklace was still in my hand. I wouldn't wear it again. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I walked towards my parents. My mother's face was pale, her eyes blazing with a protective fury I had never seen before. My father's jaw was set like granite, his gaze fixed on Liam with a deep, profound disappointment that was far more terrifying than any anger. The engagement party was over. The war, however, had just begun. I did not break down in the car. I did not weep on my mother's shoulder. I sat in the plush silence of the town car, my hands folded neatly in my lap, the sterling heirloom a cold, heavy secret in my clutch purse. The lights of the city streamed by, painting fleeting patterns of gold on my stony face. My parents were silent too, a pressurized quiet that promised a coming storm. The moment the car door closed behind us in the marbled foyer of our home, the calm shattered. "I will have that boy's head on a platter," my father, Alistair Vance, growled, his voice vibrating with a rage I had seldom witnessed. He wasn't a loud man. His anger was a subterranean force, all the more powerful for its quiet intensity. To humiliate my daughter, in such a manner. To side with that viper. "Alistair," my mother, Eleanor, said, her voice a sharp, steady blade. She placed a hand on his arm, not to soothe but to direct. "The boy is a symptom. The disease is in our own house." Her gaze, sharp and discerning, turned to me. "Alara, look at me." I met her eyes. There were no tears in mine. The fire had burned them away. "Is it true?" she asked, her tone leaving no room for prevarication. "Did you flaunt the necklace to hurt Chloe?" The question coming from her was a fresh wound. "You believe I could do that?" "I am asking," she repeated, her gaze unwavering. I need to hear it from you. No, I said, the word simple and absolute. I wore the heirloom as I have been taught for a formal family occasion. Chloe came to my room this afternoon and made a show of admiring it. I told her it was not a trinket. She cried. I thought nothing of it. It seems she thought of everything. My mother studied my face for a long moment, then gave a single sharp nod. That is what I thought. He turned to my father. Liam has chosen his side. Repeatedly. This was merely the most public and damaging of his betrayals. He is my son, my father said, but the words were heavy with conflict. He is the orphan we took in out of the goodness of our hearts, my mother retorted, her composure finally fracturing. And he has repaid us by systematically undermining our true child, blinded by that manipulative girl. I will not have it, Alistair. I will not have her in my house a moment longer. The vehemence in her voice was a balm to my ravaged soul. I had not realized how alone I had felt until I felt the solid, ferocious wall of my mother's belief at my back. Where is he? My father asked, his voice dangerously low. As if on cue, the front door opened and closed. Footsteps echoed on the marble. Liam strode into the foyer, his face still set in lines of righteous anger. He didn't even look at me. I've just seen Chloe home. She's devastated, of course. I hope you're happy, Lara. You've finally succeeded in making her feel like an utter outsider. The room went still. Liam, my father's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp as a scalpel. You will not speak to your sister that way. Not now, not ever again. Liam blinked, taken aback. He was used to my father's quiet disappointment, not this icy authority. Father, with all due respect, you didn't see. I saw everything I needed to see, my father interrupted. I saw you stand by while a Blackwood publicly shamed your sister. I saw you accuse her without evidence. I saw you defend the person who instigated this entire sordid affair. Chloe didn't instigate anything. Julian came to his own conclusions. Based on what? My mother snapped. Whispers. Tears. Did he, a virtual stranger, independently deduce that Alara was being cruel? Or did he hear it from a source he trusted? From you. Liam faltered. I may have mentioned that Alara has been difficult with Chloe lately. It's the truth. Your perceived truth, I said, finding my voice. It was steady, but it carried the heat of the fire within. A truth built entirely on Chloe's performances. Tell me, Liam, in all the years of my alleged bullying, have you ever once witnessed me say or do a single cruel thing to her? Or have you only ever seen the aftermath, when she's crying and you rush to comfort her? He opened his mouth, then closed it. A faint flush crept up his neck. He couldn't cite a single instance because it had never happened. He had only ever seen the reaction, never the action, because the action was a fiction. It's always the same pattern, I continued, pressing my advantage. I have something she wants. He covets it. He can't have it. So she creates a scenario where I am the villain and you are her white knight. And you, every single time, you play your part perfectly. That's not true, he whispered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. It is true, my father said, his voice heavy with finality. And tonight your part in this charade cost your sister her reputation and her engagement. You have failed her as a brother. You have failed us as a son. The word son hung in the air, a fragile, contested title. I want you to listen to me very carefully, Liam, my father continued. Your allegiance in this family is to this family. To your mother, to me, and to your sister. If your allegiance lies elsewhere, then so does your place here. Liam stared at him aghast. You're choosing her side? After what she did? There are no sides, my mother cried out in frustration. There is only the truth. And you are willfully blind to it. Before the argument could escalate further, the doorbell chimed, a jarringly normal sound in the highly charged atmosphere. The butler, looking profoundly uncomfortable, announced, Mr. Julian Blackwood to see Miss Alara. A fresh wave of disbelief washed over me. What unimaginable gall did he possess to show his face here? Julian strode into the foyer, his expression one of grim purpose. He ignored my parents, his gaze landing on me. Alara, he began as if he were a king granting an audience. I've come to give you a chance to make this right. I could only stare at him, speechless. Chloe is heartbroken, he stated. Your little display with the necklace only made things worse. This ends now. You will come with me to her apartment. You will apologize to her sincerely and publicly. And if you do, I will consider reinstating our engagement. The arrogance was so profound, so utterly detached from reality, that I felt the last vestiges of any feeling I had ever had for him, fondness, respect, tolerance, evaporate into nothing. He truly believed he held all the power. He believed his name, his status was a prize I would grovel for. Liam was watching me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Apologize, Alara, his look seemed to beg. Fix this. Be the bigger person. I looked at Julian, at his handsome, empty face. I looked at Liam, my brother, the stranger. I felt the solid, unwavering presence of my parents behind me. The lesson was over. Now it was time to teach one of my own. You have precisely 3 seconds to get out of my house, I said, my voice low and venomous. Julian's eyes widened in shock. Alara, be reasonable. You'll be a social pariah. No one will touch you after this. Get out, my father said, taking a step forward. His presence was suddenly immense, filling the foyer. You are no longer welcome here. The engagement is terminated. Permanently. Now leave before I have you removed. For a moment, Julian looked between us, realizing his power play had failed catastrophically. His face darkened with fury. You'll regret this, Alara. All of you. He turned on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him with a sound of finality. The silence he left behind was different. It was clean. The lines were now drawn in ink that could not be erased. I had lost a fiancé and a brother in one night. But I had found my voice, and I had rediscovered the steel in my own spine. And I knew with a cold, clear certainty that this was far from over. The days that followed were a study in controlled chaos. The society pages were, of course, having a field day. Blackwood Vance engagement iced in scandal. Eris humiliated at her own party. The photographs were brutal. Me standing frozen in the center of the ballroom, my face a mask of shock. Julian's triumphant, scornful expression. Chloe weeping artfully into Liam's chest. I refused to hide. I accompanied my mother to her charity board meetings, my head held high. I lunched at the most visible restaurants with my father, discussing business and politics as if my world hadn't been turned inside out. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. The fire of my humiliation had been forged into a shield of cold, public indifference. Liam had moved out. He'd packed a bag that very night and gone to Chloe, who had a small, tasteful apartment paid for by a trust from her late parents. The finality of it was a dull, constant ache beneath the adrenaline. My brother was gone. The boy I'd grown up with, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike and had secretly shared his dessert with me when I was sad, had chosen his path. He was lost to me. My father was a man transformed. The quiet, contemplative businessman was gone, replaced by a strategic general. The betrayal had cut him to the core, but he channeled his pain into action. The Vance fortune was vast, built on shipping, real estate, and old-world industry. The Blackwood fortune was newer, rooted in tech and finance. They moved in the same circles, but their empires were different. My father began to systematically disentangle them. He called in favors. He applied pressure in boardrooms and on golf courses. The message was clear. To side with Julian Blackwood was to make an enemy of Alistair Vance. The social tide began to turn, slowly but perceptibly. The initial wave of scandalous gossip was being replaced by murmurs of admiration for my poise and condemnation for Julian's brutishness. It was during this time that my father broached a new subject. We were in his study, a room that smelled of leather-bound books and fine whiskey. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The Blackwood alliance is dead, he stated, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed one to me. I took it, the crystal cool in my hand. And good riddance. But, Alara, our company, it needs strong alliances. The world is changing. We need to innovate, to look forward, not just back. I took a sip, the whiskey burning a pleasant path down my throat. What are you saying, father? I'm saying that while Julian was a mistake, the principle of a strategic union was not. He leaned forward, his eyes intent. I have been in talks with Silas Thorne. I stilled. Thorne Industries. A name that commanded a different kind of respect. If the Vances were old money aristocracy, the Thornes were new money royalty. They were based in the coastal tech hub of Crestfall, and their rise had been meteoric, built on the genius of their founder, Silas Thorne, a man renowned for his ruthless business acumen and his almost pathological privacy. Silas Thorne has a grandson, my father continued. Carter. He's being groomed to take over. He's sharp, innovative, and from everything I hear, he lacks Julian's theatrical cruelty. Silas believes a union between our families would be a powerful thing. A merging of legacy and innovation. An arranged marriage. The concept felt archaic, like something from one of the historical novels I loved. Yet after the fiasco of my love match, the cold, hard logic of it was appealing. There would be no illusions, no false promises. It would be a partnership. A business arrangement with personal benefits. You want me to meet him, I said. I do. But the decision this time is entirely yours. I will not force you. If you say no, we will find another way. But I believe Carter Thorne is a man you could respect. And I suspect he would respect you. I thought of Julian's condescending smile, his threat that no one would touch me. I thought of the need to build a future that was impervious to the petty schemes of Chloe's and the betrayals of Liam's. A future where my name was a fortress, not a target. Set up the meeting, I said. It was held not in a romantic restaurant, but in the neutral, sterile conference room of a high-end law firm. Carter Thorne was nothing like I expected. He wasn't the slick, fast-talking tech bro I had imagined. He was tall with a quiet, watchful intensity. His hair was dark, his eyes a startling, perceptive gray. He didn't smile easily. He shook my hand, his grip firm and brief. Elara, he said, his voice a low baritone. I've read the files. No pretense. No small talk. I appreciated it. As have I replied. The files were extensive dossiers on each other's business accomplishments, education, and public personas. My file, I knew, would have included all the sordid details of the broken engagement. He gestured for us to sit. Your family's handling of the Blackwood situation was impressive. Decisive. It was necessary. He nodded, his gaze resting on my face, assessing. My grandfather believes a merger would give Vance Global the technological edge it needs to dominate for the next century. I believe he is correct. But a merger of companies is one thing. A merger of lives is another. I agree, I said. What are your terms? A flicker of what might have been amusement crossed his features. Direct. Good. My terms are simple. Partnership. Respect. Discretion. I have no interest in public dramas or emotional entanglements. I require a partner who is intelligent, poised, and capable of managing the social and philanthropic obligations of my position. Someone who understands that our public image is an asset. He was describing a job. And it was a job I was uniquely qualified for. And in private? I asked, meeting his gaze squarely. In private, we would negotiate the terms of our cohabitation. I expect civility. I value my privacy and my space. I assume you value yours. We would be allies first and foremost. It was the most unromantic proposal imaginable. And it was the most honest one I had ever received. I can agree to those terms, I said. I have one condition of my own. He raised an eyebrow, inviting me to continue. Liam and Chloe. They are to have no part in our lives. No contact. No access. They are non-persons. Carter studied me for a long moment. I understand you have a brother. I had a brother, I corrected, my voice flat. He is dead to me. He didn't flinch. He simply nodded. Consider it done. Their world will become very, very small. I can assure you of that. There was a quiet authority in his words, a promise of power that made the hairs on my arms stand up. This was not a man who made empty threats. We spent the next hour discussing the logistics. The prenuptial agreement, which was staggeringly complex and entirely fair. The relocation to Crestfall. The timeline. It was like planning a corporate takeover. As the meeting drew to a close, he stood. I believe this will be a profitable alliance, Elara. I stood as well. As do I, Carter. He didn't offer to shake my hand again. He simply gave me that brief, assessing nod and left the room. I stood there for a moment, alone in the silent conference room. My heart wasn't fluttering. There were no butterflies. Instead, there was a profound sense of calm. I had just traded the gilded cage of my old life for a new one of my own choosing. This cage was made of titanium and cold, hard logic. And for the first time in a long time, I felt its bars not as a confinement but as a protection. I had lost a weak fiancé and a treacherous brother. In their place I had gained a powerful ally. The game had changed, and I was no longer a pawn. I was a player. The announcement of my engagement to Carter Thorne sent shockwaves through the city that dwarfed the scandal of my broken engagement. It was a masterstroke, a move so bold and unexpected that it completely reframed the narrative. I was no longer the pitted, jilted heiress. I was the strategic visionary who had landed the most elusive bachelor in the country. The whispers of my humiliation were replaced by awed speculation about the power of the Vance-Thorne alliance. My father's satisfaction was a palpable thing. The business world saw it for what it was: a declaration of war on the Blackwoods and a massive power shift. Our company's stock, which had taken a minor hit after the Elysian incident, soared to new heights. The Thornes handled the publicity with ruthless efficiency. A single tasteful press release. A carefully curated photograph of Carter and me, taken at a distance during a casual walk through a private garden. We looked not like lovesick puppies but like two monarchs surveying their domain. It was perfect. Meanwhile, the fallout for Julian Blackwood was swift and severe. His family, who had been furious about his unilateral decision to cancel the engagement without consulting them, were apoplectic about the Thorne alliance. They had lost not just a connection to the Vance legacy, but had actively created a powerful, motivated enemy. Rumor had it that Julian's father had nearly disowned him on the spot, ordering him to salvage the situation, a laughably impossible task. I heard none of this directly, of course. My world had already begun to pivot away from Harblewood and toward Crestfall. But my mother, with her impeccable network of informants, kept me apprised. "He's been trying to call," she said one afternoon as we reviewed fabric swatches for my wedding dress. The wedding was to be a small, elegant affair in Crestfall, a deliberate snub to the Harblewood social scene that had witnessed my downfall. I didn't need to ask who he was. "And your father's secretaries have been instructed to hang up on him. He showed up at your father's club yesterday. Was refused entry." She smiled, a thin, sharp expression. "It seems the Blackwoods are discovering that some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt." A part of me, the part that had once thought I could build a life with Julian, felt a twinge of pity. It was quickly extinguished. He had made his choice. He had been the architect of his own ruin just as Liam had been of his. His absence was a ghost in the house. My parents never spoke of him. It was as if he had never existed. His name had been removed from the trust discussions, his access to certain family accounts quietly revoked. My father's love, once given so freely, had been withdrawn with the same finality with which Liam had withdrawn his support for me. I knew through the same grapevine that he and Chloe were living together in her apartment, playing house with their shared victimhood. I wondered if he was happy, surrounded by the syrupy sweetness of her lies. I wondered if he ever lay awake at night and questioned the narrative he had so fervently believed. I didn't have long to wonder. A week before my wedding, the ghost decided to materialize. I was in the library, packing a few of my favorite books to ship to Crestfall, when I heard the raised voices in the foyer. Liam's voice, loud and angry. My father's, a low, dangerous rumble. I walked out to see Liam standing in the doorway, his face flushed with fury. Chloe was hovering just behind him, her hand on his arm, her eyes wide with fake concern. "You can't do this." Liam was shouting at my father. "Cutting me out? After everything? I am your son." "You forfeited that title when you betrayed your sister," my father said, his voice chillingly calm. "You are no son of mine. This is because of her, isn't it?" Liam spat, his gaze landing on me with pure venom. "She's turned you against me. She's always been jealous of the bond Chloe and I share." It was the same old record, scratched and skipping. The same pathetic script. "There is no bond, Liam," I said, my voice cutting through his tirade. "There is only a manipulator and her willing puppet. You made your choice. You live with it. You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered. "Marrying some tech freak to save face? It's pathetic." "That's enough," my father roared, the sound echoing in the vast foyer. The force of it made Liam take a step back. "You will not speak to my daughter that way in her own home. You are not welcome here. The matter of your inheritance is closed. You will receive nothing. You are entitled to nothing." Liam's face went pale. You can't, the company shares, the trust." The shares were in my name, held for you as a beneficiary. I have removed you. The trust was for my children. My father emphasized the word. You are not my child. You never were. The words were a nuclear strike. They landed with devastating force. Liam looked as if he'd been physically struck. Even Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What are you saying? Liam whispered, his bravado utterly gone. My father's expression was one of granite. It was a kindness we never meant to revoke. But you have forced my hand. Your parents, my dear friends, died when you were 3. We took you in. We gave you our name, our love, our legacy. And you have thrown it all away for a girl with pretty tears and a black heart. You are not a Vance by blood, and you have proven you are not one by character. Now get out of my house. The revelation hung in the air, stark and brutal. Liam was not just disowned, he was unmasked. The foundation of his entire identity, the beloved adopted son of a powerful family, had been pulled out from under him. He stared at my father, then at me, his eyes wide with a horror I knew would haunt him for the rest of his life. He had gambled everything on Chloe, and he had lost absolutely everything. Without another word, he turned and stumbled out the door, Chloe scrambling after him. The door closed and the house was silent once more. My father's shoulders slumped. The anger drained from him, leaving only a profound, weary sadness. He looked at me. It had to be done, Alara. He had to know the truth of what he had thrown away. I walked over to him and took his hand. It was trembling. I know, father. The reckoning was complete. The last loose thread of my old life had been severed. There was nothing left for me in Harborwood but ashes. It was time to leave them behind and step into my new life. Crestfall was a city of glass and sea spray, a stark, beautiful contrast to the stone and tradition of Harborwood. Our new home was not a gated manor but a stunning, minimalist cliffside estate that seemed to float above the ocean. The walls were glass, the lines were clean, and the silence was a tangible presence. It was Carter's domain and I was his guest, soon to be his partner. Life with Carter was exactly as negotiated. Civil, discreet, and mutually respectful. We had separate wings, connected by a vast open-plan living area and a state-of-the-art kitchen that neither of us used, staffed by a silent, efficient cook. Our interactions were scheduled like business meetings. Dinners together 3 times a week to discuss our public calendar. A weekly walk along the private beach to ensure we presented a united front for any paparazzi lenses that might be trained on us from the water. It was not a warm life, but it was a secure one. I felt no passion for Carter, but I felt a deep and growing appreciation for his mind, his efficiency, and his utter lack of drama. He was a man of his word. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, he had demonstrated the first part of his promise regarding Liam and Chloe. A business associate of Liam's suddenly withdrew from a promising venture. Chloe's application for a coveted position at a prestigious art gallery was mysteriously, permanently lost. Small, precise actions that constricted their world without a single direct threat. It was masterful. My wedding day dawned clear and bright. The ceremony was to be held on the terrace of our cliffside home, overlooking the endless blue of the Pacific. It was a small affair, maybe 50 people. Silas Thorne, a formidable man in his 70s with eyes as sharp as Carter's, gave me a nod of approval. My parents looked on, their pride a solid, warm presence amidst the cool, modern elegance. I felt calm. I was dressed in a sleek columnar gown of ivory silk, severe and magnificent. It was a world away from the frothy, romantic confection I had worn for Julian. This dress was armor. As I walked toward Carter, who stood waiting under a simple arch of twisted driftwood, I felt the rightness of my choice. He looked at me, and in his gray eyes I saw not love but a flicker of respect. It was enough. More than enough. The officiant began to speak. The words were traditional, but they felt new, imbued with the weight of our practical agreement. I repeated my vows, my voice clear and steady. Carter did the same. And then, as the officiant said the words, "If anyone here present can show just and legal cause why these two may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace," a commotion erupted at the back of the terrace. "I object." The voice was ragged, desperate. A voice I had hoped never to hear again. Julian Blackwood stood at the edge of the terrace, his clothes disheveled, his hair a mess. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He had clearly bypassed security, a feat that spoke to a frightening level of determination. A horrified gasp went through the small crowd. My father shot to his feet. Carter, however, did not even flinch. He simply turned his head, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if a fly had buzzed too close to his ear. "Ilara!" Julian cried out, taking a stumbling step forward. "Don't do this. This is a mistake. You can't marry him. You belong with me. I love you." The words were so hollow, so ludicrous that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "This is not about love, Julian," I said, my voice carrying easily in the stunned silence. "It never was for you. It was about control. You lost it and you can't stand it." "No. I was wrong. I was a fool. Chloe, she lied to me. She manipulated me. I see that now." He was pleading, his dignity completely gone. "Please, Ilara. Give me another chance. Call this off." Before I could respond, Carter made a small, almost imperceptible gesture with his hand. From the periphery, 4 large, silent security guards materialized. They moved with a swift, fluid efficiency. "Ilara!" Julian shrieked as 2 of the men grabbed his arms. He struggled, a pathetic, flailing sight. "Don't let them do this. I love you." The other 2 guards moved to assist. There was a brief, ugly scuffle. A punch was thrown, not by Julian but by a guard, a sharp, professional blow to the solar plexus that doubled Julian over, silencing his cries. They didn't drag him so much as they efficiently removed him, lifting him off his feet and carrying him, gagging and helpless, back the way he came. The whole incident lasted less than 30 seconds. The silence that returned was profound. The guests sat in stunned disbelief. Carter turned back to the officiant. "You may continue." The officiant, looking shaken, cleared his throat. "As I was saying, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Carter turned to me. There was no kiss stipulated in our agreement. A simple, firm handshake was what we had settled on. But in that moment he did something unexpected. He leaned in, his voice for my ears only. "The first threat to our alliance has been neutralized," he murmured. "There will not be a second." Then he straightened up and offered me his arm. I took it, my hand steady on his sleeve. We turned to face our guests as Mr. and Mrs. Carter Thorne. There was a smattering of applause, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. The unwelcome guest was gone. The last ghost of my past had been exorcised. As we walked back down the aisle, the vast, glittering ocean stretching out before us, I knew I was finally, truly free. The first few months of my marriage were a lesson in the architecture of a new life. Carter and I settled into a rhythm that was both distant and deeply intertwined. We were partners in the most clinical sense of the word, and yet I found a strange solace in the predictability of it. There were no surprises, no emotional landmines. Our world was one of board meetings, charity galas, and quiet, strategic dinners. I managed the Vance philanthropic interests with a new, sharp-eyed efficiency, merging them with the Thorne Foundation to create a charitable force that was both impactful and excellent for public relations. I heard nothing more from Julian. Carter informed me in his typically unemotional way that the Blackwoods, in a desperate attempt to salvage their position, had shipped him off to manage a failing subsidiary in Europe. He was, for all intents and purposes, exiled. I felt nothing. He was a closed chapter, a book I had no desire to reread. Liam and Chloe, however, were a lingering shadow. Carter's people, a network of discreet lawyers, private investigators, and corporate strategists, kept me apprised. The information was never offered freely, but if I asked, it was provided with brutal efficiency. After the revelation of his adoption and disinheritance, Liam's life had unraveled with spectacular speed. The small venture capital firm where he had been a rising star, a position secured entirely through the Vance name, let him go. Without the backing of that name, he was just another ambitious MBA. The apartment he shared with Chloe was in her name, funded by her dwindling trust. The money wouldn't last forever. They were married in a small, sad civil ceremony. I saw a single grainy photograph. Chloe was wearing a cheap, off-the-rack dress, her smile looking more like a rictus of panic. Liam looked hollow, his eyes empty. There was no triumphant glow, no victory in their union. It was a merger of desperation. According to the reports, their existence was a slow, grinding misery. Every job Liam applied for mysteriously fell through at the final stage. Every social circle they tried to enter found reasons to exclude them. Chloe's attempts to leverage her artistic sensibilities into a career went nowhere. They were pariahs not through loud condemnation, but through a silent, concerted freeze-out orchestrated by the long, unseen arm of Thorn influence. They were being monitored, their movements tracked, their finances scrutinized. They were living in a gilded cage of their own making, but the gilding was flaking off to reveal the rusty bars beneath. Carter was keeping his promise. Their world was becoming very, very small. I thought I would feel vindicated. I thought I would feel a savage joy at their suffering. But mostly I felt a distant, weary pity. They had chosen this path. They had sacrificed everything, family, loyalty, truth, for the fleeting pleasure of a lie. And now they were trapped in the consequences. One afternoon I was in my home office, reviewing architectural plans for a new library wing we were funding, when my assistant's voice came over the intercom. "Mrs. Thorne? There are visitors at the main gate. A Mr. and Mrs. Liam Vance. They are insistent." I stilled. The audacity. To come here. To my home. To Carter's fortress. Had they learned nothing? A part of me was curious. What did they hope to achieve? A reconciliation? A confrontation? A handout? "Have security send them away," I said, my voice cool. They are making a scene, ma'am. The man is shouting." I sighed. Of course he was. Liam had never handled rejection with grace. He only knew how to escalate. I made a decision. This ends now. Once and for all. "Have them brought to the guest house," I instructed. "I'll see them there. And alert my husband." The guest house was a small, beautiful structure 100 yards from the main house, all glass and bleached wood. I arrived first, taking a seat in a minimalist chair that felt like a throne. I didn't have to wait long. The door opened and a security guard ushered them in. Liam and Chloe. They looked aged. Liam's suit was wrinkled, his face drawn. Chloe, once the picture of delicate beauty, had a pinched, anxious look about her. Her clothes were dated, her hair lacked its usual luster. Poverty, or the fear of it, was not becoming on her. "Elara," Liam began, his voice a mixture of bluster and desperation. "You will address my wife as Mrs. Thorne," a voice said from the doorway. Carter stood there, having entered silently. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He wasn't even looking at them. He was looking at me, a silent question in his eyes. "Do you need me to handle this?" I gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of my head. This was my mess to clean up. Liam flinched. Chloe's eyes darted to Carter, and a flicker of her old, calculating hunger appeared before it was smothered by fear. "What do you want, Liam?" I asked, my tone flat. We need help," he blurted out, all pretense gone. "You've ruined us. Every door is closed. No one will hire me. Our money is almost gone." "I have done nothing to you," I replied. "You made your choices. You reaped the consequences. The market simply has no use for a man who betrays his own family. It's a poor character reference." "He's your brother," Chloe cried, her voice shrill. "He is not," I said, and the finality in my voice made her recoil. "And you, Chloe, are nothing to me. You won, remember? You got him. You have exactly what you fought for. I hope he was worth the price." Liam's face crumpled. "Father. Alistair," he cut me off. Completely. He told me I was adopted." "It was a truth you should have been told long ago," I said. "Perhaps it would have encouraged a little more gratitude, a little less entitlement." "You have to talk to him," Liam pleaded, taking a step forward. Carter shifted slightly, a panther stirring, and Liam froze. "Please, Elara. I'm begging you. We have nothing." I looked at them, these two broken people standing in my beautiful, sun-drenched prison of a guest house. This was the culmination of all their schemes, all their lies. This miserable, shrinking existence. "No," I said, the word simple and absolute. "You have each other. That's what you wanted. That's all you will ever have. Now you will leave this property. And you will never attempt to contact me or my family again. If you do, the monitoring you've undoubtedly noticed will become something far less passive. Do you understand?" The hope died in Liam's eyes, replaced by a hollow despair. Chloe began to cry, real tears this time, born of genuine terror. They were the tears of someone who had finally run out of tricks. Carter pushed himself off the doorframe. "The conversation is over." He nodded to the security guard who moved to escort them out. They left without another word, defeated utterly. I watched them go, two small, pathetic figures being led away from the fortress walls. "Are you all right?" Carter asked, his voice neutral. I took a deep breath, letting the last of the old ghosts drift away on the ocean breeze. "Yes," I said, and for the first time I truly meant it. "I am perfectly all right." Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. The years as they passed were not marked by dramatic events, but by the quiet, steady accumulation of power and purpose. The Vance-Thorne alliance proved to be as formidable as our fathers had predicted. My understanding of Old World legacy combined with Carter's vision for the future created an entity that was unstoppable. We didn't just lead the market, we defined it. My relationship with Carter evolved in its own strange, unspoken way. We never became lovers in the traditional, passionate sense. Ours was a partnership of the mind and spirit, a deep, abiding respect that was, in its own way, more intimate than any fleeting romance. We were allies, confidants, and the only people in the world who truly understood the unique pressures and isolation of our positions. We built a life not on a foundation of love, but on a bedrock of mutual trust and unwavering loyalty. It was more than I had ever had with Julian, and in many ways, more than I saw in most love marriages. We had a son, Alexander, a decision reached through calm, logical discussion about heirs and legacy. He was raised with every advantage, but more importantly, he was raised with a clear-eyed understanding of his responsibilities. He had my father's thoughtful eyes and Carter's quiet intensity. He was the true merger, the living embodiment of our alliance. My parents were doting grandparents, visiting Crestfall often. The pain of the past never fully left my father's eyes, but it was softened by the joy of his grandson and the pride he felt in the woman I had become. The Vance name was secure, its legacy not diminished but transformed. As for Liam and Chloe, they became a cautionary tale, their names occasionally whispered in the circles they had been cast out from. They drifted from one small town to another, living on the remnants of Chloe's trust until it was finally gone. Liam took a series of dead-end jobs, his spirit and ambition broken. Chloe's beauty faded, hardened by resentment and a life of petty struggles. They were bound together not by love, but by the shared wreckage of their choices, two miserable people in a small, shabby apartment, constantly looking over their shoulders, forever watched by the invisible, implacable presence of the empire they had tried and failed to topple. One evening I stood on the vast terrace of our cliffside home, the same terrace where I had married Carter. Alexander was asleep inside. Carter was working in his study, the soft blue glow of his monitors a familiar nighttime beacon. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and powerful, its rhythmic crash a constant, soothing soundtrack to my life. I thought of the girl I had been in Harborwood, trapped in a gilded cage, desperate for approval, willing to shrink herself to fit the expectations of others. That girl had died a painful public death at the Grand Elysian. In her place, a woman had been forged. I had traded a life of performative fragility for one of genuine strength. I had exchanged the false love of a weak man for the steadfast partnership of a strong one. I had lost a brother who was a lie and gained a family built on truth, however unconventional. The heirloom necklace was locked away in a vault. I had never worn it again. It was a relic of a different time, a symbol of a legacy that was now mine to define, not just inherit. My legacy was not in a piece of jewelry, but in the company I helped lead, the charities I championed, the son I was raising, and the unshakable peace I had built for myself. The wind picked up, pulling at my hair and carrying the salty tang of the sea. I breathed it in deep and full. This was my life now. Not a cage but a kingdom. Not a performance but a purpose. I had started by the harbor in a world of still, stagnant water. Now I lived by the ocean with its boundless horizons and relentless, cleansing waves. I had chosen the storm over the calm, the vast unknown over the gilded prison. And I had never been more free. The end.